We were watching another interesting race this week after a campaign marred by anti-gay and racist attacks. Ken Siver beat out Sylvia Jordan to become Southfield's first openly gay mayor. He's taking over at a time when the city is facing tremendous change and challenges, including the task of finding a developer for the massive Northland Mall property. I think this was interesting. It's always interesting to watch Southfield, where Brenda Lawrence was the mayor for so long, and now she's in Congress. And Southfield's a fourth largest city in Oakland County, so they still have this kind of a large stake, even though it's a part-time job, essentially the mayor's job is. So
Is it, or is it full-time there?
Yeah, I think it's a part-time job, and they also have city manager who comes in as well. But the biggest thing that the mayor is really going to have to take a look at now is this huge Northland Mall property that the city has purchased, and kind of the larger picture of how Southfield reinvents itself with now that option of property. Nolan.
I think Southfield has done a pretty good job over the years of sort of hanging on and maintaining its property values and its quality of life. You know, a lot of the older ring suburban suburbs, you know, were drained or being drained in the same way Detroit was as people pushed out. I think Southfield has done a pretty good job hanging on to its business base and what have you. This is a very prime piece of property at Northland. It's not going to be an easy sell to get somebody to come in and make the investment that the city would like to see in terms of mixed use and what have you. But the location is excellent. If the economy keeps growing, I think they're going to do well with that piece of property.
You know, Nancy, I think a lot of places are watching what Southfield is going to do now, because obviously we're looking back at the history of Northland Mall, and that was really the first suburban shopping mall in the area and where people came to, and now trying to reinvent itself and say, what do you put in that place that is just as attractive in the area?
Well, and that's something that whatever developer comes in has to be really sensitive to what is going to be successful, not some cookie cutter sort of development that it could be plugged down in any community. It needs to be put into what's going to serve the area, what's going to be viable, what's going to be sustainable. But it is very interesting what's happened in Southfield. You know, as Northland opened, it was as sort of people started moving out of Detroit and swelling these inner ring suburbs. Then Northland, though obviously shopping malls across the country have had problems. The way we shop is changing. The things we look for in shopping experiences has changed. But Northland was also hurt by people moving past Southfield and out to the farther suburbs or the exurbs, as wealth has moved sort of out of Detroit and then kind of kept going. And now one of the things they have to compete with is that Detroit is very attractive destination right now for young people. There are businesses that have traditionally been located in places like Southfield, Livonia, those sort of suburbs that are coming back downtown. Obviously, Dan Gilbert brought his companies downtown. A lot of companies affiliated with him. Some other companies are opening downtown offices to satisfy, increasing demand, but also younger employees who want to be in the city. So this is an interesting thing of who do they go after, and how do they develop something that's going to appeal.
And I think it's still an interesting conversation about competition, because there is in Southeast Michigan, there is such a thought that everyone wants Detroit to succeed and Detroit to do well. And it's a victory when you see that more companies are moving downtown. And it's a victory when you see more workers moving downtown. But there still is that competition. You still have the suburbs saying, oh, we could be losing some of those things there, Nolan.
Well, I mean, every community has got to look out for its own interest. I don't think Southfield's going to say, oh, gosh, we're going to leave this property vacant because if we develop it, it might hurt Detroit. I mean, they're going to have to make their case in a competitive way. I think there's growth in the region, and I think everybody can do well. Southfield has been an interesting community. It's got a great housing mix. It's got decent schools. It's got diversity. It's still a very attractive community.
So it's interesting. When you say every community has to look out for its own interest, I understand and agree with that on some level, but isn't this also part of what we're always talking about, this lack of regionalism and this idea that that you do have to, it's me first, and that we can't build a stronger region as a whole because everyone's only invested in their own interest? I'm not saying they shouldn't develop this property to make it easier for anyone else, but it's an interesting, the way that we've done, we're not getting a lot of residents here in Michigan. So when we talk about population growing somewhere, it's really moving pieces around on the board, not net growth.
Not getting more people in.
So it's a complicated situation here in which we're talking about one community's benefit equaling another community's maybe detriment. And But yet, it seems like this is what we've been talking about for years, is that we have to maybe stop looking through that very narrow lens.
Yeah, but Detroit's not going to say, well, we're not going to build a new office tower, we're not going to
Of course not.
redevelop this
And-
building
and nor
because
should-
it might
and nor should-
drain,
and nor
it
should
might
Southfield.
drain, it might drain something off 10 Mile Road. I mean,
And it's just a
you have
sort of
to
a bigger
meet-
picture question
Right.
about how we think of ourselves as a region.
But you have to address market demand. This site can't remain empty. I think they're going to come up with, they're working with Oakland County now to try to figure out what makes sense. And I think if there's a market for development there, and there should be, given its location, they'll do okay.
Yeah, and they got to start figuring out how to demo it first.